Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of Bolts Breakdown. Jay Recher here with you. We're waiting on my man, Bryan Burns, to chime in from the nation's capital. Don't know how the weather is up there, but hopefully, if it's been going how it's been going the last couple games, hopefully it's nice and stormy, nice and wet, lightning and thunder everywhere. That'll bode well for the Lightning as they go try to clinch this damn thing. Game 6 tonight up there in the nation's capital. Let's see if we can bring Bryan in here. We had some technical difficulties last time, but I'm thinking this time, and just like that, we're adding him. Last time we weren't even getting this far, Burnsy, so hopefully we can get you in here. Bryan's up there in Washington, D.C. And we're good. There he is.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's up, man? Are you in the VIP suite or what?
No VIP suite, just the normal hotel room here in DC.
How's the weather up there? Everybody wants to know.
Actually, it's really nice today. It's
Oh no, that doesn't go. That doesn't bode well.
a little muggy. It's a lot like Tampa, actually, how it usually is.
Do me a favor, do a rain dance, okay? Because we need as much lightning and thunder around that building as possible.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, they got hit with a lot of rain up here, man. There's flooding and all kinds of stuff, so I don't know if they can handle any more rain.
All right, Bernsey, before we get into the pivotal Game 6 tonight, let's look back on Game 5. And, talking to Chris Kunitz after the game, you were there. I mean, you're not going to get a much better start than that. And not only do they score early, but it comes from the little engine that fourth line. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks. That fourth line was bound to break through. They break through with 2 goals, but that first one in the first period to get the Lightning on the board really set the tone for the game.
Yeah, and that's been a big key for this series. And honestly, it's been a big key for this entire playoff run that the Lightning have been on. When they're able to score first, get that early lead, it seems like they can kind of settle into their game a little bit. They can play that defensive style of hockey, the way that they closed out the Bruins in the final 3 games of that second round series. And they can take their opponent a little bit out of their game as well. John Cooper's talked about how Washington has to play a little bit differently than they'd like to when they're trailing. They get a little looser. They open up a little bit. They're not quite as consistent in their systems as they are when the score's tied or when they're playing with the lead. So yeah, that's a big key, for this team to get out to those early leads. And we saw it in Game 5. That early goal, and then Palat follows up with that snipe from the high slot through the screen. Callahan gets the goal early in the second period, and I really thought the Lightning, as much as you can say that Washington maybe dictated play over the final, the second period into the third period, and the Lightning didn't have too much offensively after that early onslaught. I thought it was a case where the Lightning just did a really good job of locking Washington down defensively. Yeah. Not necessarily going into a shell or playing like a prevent or anything like that, but just being smart with the puck and focusing on the defensive end of the ice. Taking those offensive chances when they presented themselves, but not when it was a case where you go for something maybe a little bit risky and it leads to an odd man break the other way, or it leads to a good scoring chance the other way. They were really going to take a chance if it led to something where they could get a good scoring chance and not give one up in return. So I thought the Lightning did a fantastic job defensively in Game 5. And for me, it was kind of a return to how they played defense towards the end of that Boston series. Is very similar, just the way that they were first to the loose pucks, the way that they were on top of the guy that they were battling for a puck, the smart passes. That first pass out of the defensive zone was where it needed to be and was the smart pass, and just a really good all-around defensive effort from the Lightning, in my opinion.
Bryan Burns, beat writer for TampaBayLightning.com. Follow him on Twitter at BBurnsNHL. Jay Recher, 620 WDAE. Follow me at Jay Recher. Let us know where you're watching Bolts Breakdown from today, and we will do our best to show out where the distant thunder is. How about Poliana Lopez de Oliveira? Let's go Bolts from Brazil, Burnsy. They're all over the country, bro. All over the country, all over the world, man. This is great.
Yeah.
But how, and the other thing, too, Burnsy, which I think is cool, is like when that fourth line scores a goal, I mean, everybody knows they don't score a lot of goals. I think that gives just an extra boost to this team, knowing like, hey, these guys, they're our defensive stalwarts. These guys always bring the thunder when it comes to using the body and checking everybody. But when they score, it's just like earlier this year when I think Jake Dotchin had 2 goals, or Andre Schuster scores. Like you see the boost in that team when guys score that don't usually do it.
Yeah, and that fourth line has been such a good defensive line for the Lightning on that top line for the Capitals, on that Kuznetsov line. They've done a really good job of limiting those guys and shutting down their chances and just matching the physicality that line plays with. So when they're able to do that, when they're able to play good defense, and then they're able to chip in goals like they were in Game 5, John Cooper talked about it the other day, and we had some media availability at the Jet Center before the team took off, and Tyler Johnson and Steven Stamkos were there. They were all asked about Ryan Callahan, and it's just like as soon as someone asks about Callahan, a smile comes across their face, and they're just like,
Yep.
he's a warrior. He's a guy that's willing to do whatever it takes to win a game, to sacrifice himself, to sacrifice his body. You can tell he's just such a respected guy in the locker room, and a voice for this team. And we don't get to really hear and see what happens behind closed doors, but I'm sure in that locker room that he's one of those big voices and one of those guys that's kind of rallying the troops, so to speak. So when you see a guy like that who hasn't put up the scoring totals that he has in the past, same with Chris Kunitz, he's never he's a pretty sneaky good scorer. You look at the end of his scoring totals at the end of regular season, and you're like, wow, he had that many goals, or he had that many points, and he hadn't had a point this postseason. Paquette, another guy, only 1 point coming into Game 5. For those guys to get on the board and contribute offensively, it just gets everybody else's juices going too. And I think that translates defensively for the rest of the lines too. They see what those guys are able to do, and they're able to say, if they can play defense like that and they can score goals, then we can do the same thing. We can lock it down defensively, and the goals will come our way.
Bryan Burns, Jay Recher here with you guys. Remember, let us know where you're watching Bolts Breakdown from today. Our Distant Thunder. We have everywhere from Brazil to North Carolina, everywhere across the world. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you put us there, and make sure you share this on your Facebook so we can get this message out, so we can talk to everybody, and we get up to a couple hundred watchers, man. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the Lightning, one win away from making it back to the Stanley Cup final, and it'll be a good matchup if they do end up playing, Vegas with the big win last night. Burnsy, last thing before we get, how surprising was that, right? Crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought Winnipeg was the team that was going to come out of the Western Conference. I really thought that what we saw from them in a regular season, I just thought they were a really balanced team with four really good lines, really physical team. I thought they presented a pretty decent matchup problem for the Lightning, and the fact that they have that speed, they have those forwards that have a lot of skill, but they also play with some physicality that we hadn't really seen from the Lightning really until this playoffs. Until towards the middle of that New Jersey series. So really surprised by, honestly, I just like everybody else with what Vegas has been able to do, but more so that, Winnipeg couldn't close the deal there with those guys. I thought, during the regular season, they were a little bit better of a team and just couldn't get it done for whatever reason.
How about Michael is all the way out in Hawaii watching this? That's awesome, Michael. You sure you don't want to switch spots? You can come over here.
They're having some problems out there. Maybe he wants to come out here and get away from that volcano.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Richard's watching in Detroit. We also got Lias Lawai. Wow, that's a great name. Lias Lawai. That's tough to pronounce. But from Spokane Valley, Johnny's home, so that is pretty awesome. Last thing before we go on to tonight, Burnsy, what about the job they did on Ovechkin? I know he scored late, but for him not to get a shot until the third period, that just, I think, is a great indication that this team is playing some really good, sound defense and keeping guys to the outside.
Yeah, and that's mostly, again, that's that fourth line that's really been tasked with trying to shut down that Ovechkin line. And we saw, in the Boston series against the Bergeron line, how it was, Braden Point. And that line that was given that assignment of being that shutdown line. But I think against the Capitals with the size that those guys have on the first line, Alex Ovechkin, he's a linebacker out there on skates with so much skill. And Tom Wilson is another big body. And Kuznetsov, he's the smallest of the three, but he's, he's not like Corey Conacher out there, the smaller kind of Smurf type players that the Lightning seem to have up and down their lineup. So again, I think they put that fourth line on those guys because they do have a little bit more grit, a little bit more toughness. They're not afraid to hit. They're not afraid to go into those battles with those bigger bodies. And again, that's you talk about why it's such a lift when those guys can get on the score sheet. It's because they're able to lock those guys down. They're able to match their physicality and even be more physical against those guys. And they're able to put up, two huge goals for the Lightning right at the beginning of periods to kind of demoralize the Caps early on in that game, and then coming out of the first intermission. So just a big night from that fourth line overall.
Bryan Burns, beat writer for TampaBayLightning.com. Jay Recher, 620 WDAE. Guys, keep continuing telling us where you're watching this from today. Joel Spurney tuning in from North Japan. We're going all over the world with Bolts Breakdown today. Make sure you guys let us know where you're watching from. And now let us know, what do you think the score is going to be tonight? Do you think the Lightning close this thing out? Game 6 tonight up in the nation's capital. And let's talk about tonight's game, Burnsy. What are your 3 keys to victory tonight for the Bolts?
Yeah, a big key for me is to stay disciplined again, just like we saw in Game 5. The Lightning didn't take a penalty in that game. And I think Paul Kennedy tweeted out that was only the second time in playoff history the Lightning have gone an entire game in the playoffs without drawing a penalty or without being penalized or having to kill a penalty. And that's big. As good as the penalty kill had been in Game 3 and Game 4, going a perfect 7-for-7, you still don't want to get in the box on these guys. They have such a dangerous power play, and talking about Ovechkin and that shot that he has, and you can shade him all you want, but he's still, if he gets the puck on that stick, it's still a really difficult assignment to try to block that, or for Vasilevsky to try to slide over and make that save. So the less opportunities you can give them on that power play, the better. I thought the Lightning played an extremely disciplined game in Game 5, and I think that's going to be another key to tonight's game, is to continuing that discipline tonight. And, I don't think they're going to go another game without giving up a penalty, but if it's just one or two, 2 power plays at the most for those guys, I think the Lightning will be doing a pretty good job in that regard.
No free passes, for sure.
Yeah. And second key for me is, I love the defensive effort from the Lightning in Game 5, and just continue that defensive effort again in Game 6. And we've seen this team do that as the series go on. We saw it in Game 5 of the first round series against New Jersey. We saw it in the last couple games in the second round series against Boston. It's like when they get their hooks in a team and they get that lead and they have a chance to close a series out, they played some of their best defensive hockey in those closeout games. So for me, I just want to see that same defensive effort tonight that we saw in Game 5. I thought, obviously the first 2 games in this series weren't anywhere close to what the Lightning wanted or needed to do in this series. Game 3 was a little bit closer to where it needed to be. Game 4 kind of got away from them a little bit, but Andrei Vasilevsky was there to really bail them out. But Game 5, I really felt was the game and kind of the blueprint for how they need to play against this Capitals team to have success. So I want to see that same defensive effort in Game 6 that we saw from Game 5. And then, third for me is just kind of, use this Caps crowd to your advantage. This is a Washington team, and I grew up in this Washington market, so I'm kind of familiar with how this fan base reacts to this team. This is another, they're on the verge of another collapse. After Game 2, they outscored the Lightning, 10-4 in those first 2 games. I mean, they were ready to start booking their tickets for the Stanley Cup final already. They were talking, potential sweep, and a lot of good feelings around Washington, D.C. at that time. Then the Lightning came in here and got 2 wins, even that series back up. And you could just tell, especially in Game 3, when the Lightning went up, I think they went up 3-0 in that game. After that third goal, there was there was a "Let's go Caps" chant a couple minutes after that, and it was almost like they were pleading with their team, let's get something going, guys. It wasn't the normal boisterous "Let's go Caps." This one was just a very nervous, what's going on here, guys. And I kind of feel like that translates down on the ice. I gotta feel when the crowd starts to get nervous, when the crowd starts to get antsy, when they get that feeling of, oh no, here we go again, here comes another collapse, that the players can feel that down on the ice. And for me, I think it's imperative the Lightning get off to a good start, because I think this fan base is going to be a little nervous going into Game 6. I don't think they're going to be quite as boisterous. And I think if the Lightning can do some good things early and not really give them a glimmer of hope early on, then that negativity from the fan base, I think, could translate down onto the ice to the Caps. It could be a case where the Lightning are able to use that and continue to get a lead or build a lead or just use that in a way, or they could use the home crowd against the home team.
That's a great point, Bernsey. Guys, make sure if you're watching Bolts Breakdown, give us a like there on your Facebook. Hit the like. You see the little like buttons popping up. So make sure you give us a like. Also, share this on your Facebook later on today, right now, whatever. Let us know where you're watching from. And who do you think is going to score the first goal tonight? Put it there on the screen. And Bernsey and I, before we get off, we will make sure we tell you who we think scores the first goal for the Lightning tonight. My one guy to watch tonight, a little weird, is Tom Wilson tonight. I feel like at the end of that game there, Bernsey, there was some frustration that set in for Ovechkin and Wilson where they try to take a little bit of a run at some of the guys. Maybe even it was like 3-0, 3-1. But I think you got to be worried if the Lightning do get a lead, if they try to muddy up the game a little bit and try to bait the Lightning into some penalties. We saw the Lightning take a lot of penalties in that one game. It was game 4. So I don't know if I don't know if it's fair to say the referee's going to be looking for him, but I think Washington knows that. And Washington, if they combine, like, hey, we know that this team can, take penalties, and in Game 5 they try to, force them into take penalties. I think the Lightning have to be conscious about that in Game 6 as well.
Yeah, and that's all part of staying disciplined, not letting those chippy situations after the whistle, not retaliating and not getting baited into those types of scrums and situations where you could find yourself in the box for an instigator penalty or get an extra minor, and Washington goes on the power play. You got to stay disciplined in that regard. And I think this Lightning team's done a pretty good job of that. We saw it in the Boston series where, Marchand and his antics and some of the other guys on that team were trying to bait the Lightning into certain situations. The Lightning did a good job of handling that. And again, as these playoff series go deeper, it seems like the refs put the whistle away a little bit more. So, again, I don't anticipate a lot of penalties called in tonight's game unless there's obvious stuff that is going to get called every time. But I think maybe you can get away with a little bit more as far as in the actual flow of the action. But it's those extracurricular things, those things after the whistle that the Lightning really have to be smart about.
It's a great point. All right, putting you on the spot, Bernsey. Who lights the lamp first for the Lightning tonight?
Yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth in my mind. I'm thinking like Palat, Point, or Stamkos. So I'm going to go with Braden Point. It just seems like he always has that ability to score a big goal in a big game, and just like what he's been able to do this whole playoffs. But since the start of the second round, he's been the Lightning almost their go-to guy. Just everything that he does for this team. So I'm going to go Braden Point. I think he gets the first one on the board for the Lightning.
We talk about distant thunder. Well, we got to talk about close thunder, too. Kevin Campbell, who's got the office next to us, is watching us. So thanks, Kev. I appreciate it. I think it's Andre Palat. You mentioned him. He always seems to score those goals on the road early in the game. Remember, Boston, he had 2 goals early on. I think he's the guy. But, especially on the road, you talk about these guys, and they go more north-south, less, overpassing. And like Marty St. Louis said, sometimes the better guys play a bit more on the road. You're not worried so much about matchups. But I think this is a big game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you're right, Burns. You mentioned something before that was very interesting. This team has done a good job of closing series out when they get the chance. And this is something that the Lightning have not done the last couple of years. Sometimes, that series against, I believe it was Montreal, they kind of let them back into it. They let them get a couple goals, a couple wins, It's a sign of maturity with this club. And I think they go in tonight and they're going to make sure that they either weather the storm early or jump out to a good lead and then just play solid defense. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a hell of a game tonight.
Yeah, you talk about that 2 seasons ago when they played Pittsburgh in the Eastern Conference Final. They were up 3-2 in that series after winning Game 5 on the road in Pittsburgh. And then they came home and just played a really poor game in Game 6. Really didn't seem to have the energy that they needed and lost that game. There's an early play where I think maybe I forget someone scored early. It might have been Victor Hedman. Like 4 minutes in, the place was going nuts. So the Jonathan Drouin was just barely offside. That goal gets wiped out, and then Pittsburgh dominated that game from that point. It's like the Lightning could never recover after that initial jolt of energy and then having it taken away. And then Pittsburgh obviously went on to win in Game 7. And like you said, I think this team has learned from those past experiences. I think I think the Lightning have played some of their best games of the playoffs when it's a game, in those Game 5s against New Jersey and against Boston. When they have a chance to close it out, it seems like Andrei Vasilevskiy steps up really big. It seems like the defense plays, that lockdown, not giving up very many grade A scoring chances at all. No odd man rushes allowed. They play their best. So this team has risen to the occasion in these potential closeout games in the first two series. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, they can do it again tonight.
Eugene Van Nostrand, great name. He sounds like a chancellor or a lord. When the thunder rolls, the lightning strikes. You gotta love that one. That's Bryan Burns, beat writer for TampaBayLightning.com. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at BBurnsNHL. You can follow the team at TB Lightning. Go to TampaBayLightning.com for all the best news and notes, especially away games like this. After morning skate, Burns, you'll be doing so much work you can't even text or tweet any of you guys. He's gonna be busting his butt, getting the work down. So good luck with that, Burnsy. I'm Jay Recher. Follow me at Jay Recher. Follow the station at 620 WDAE. Remember to go to 620WDAE.com for the best Bolts coverage. Follow me on Facebook as well at Jay Recher, my fan page. We always put Bolts breakdown up on there. If you didn't catch the beginning of this, we'll be on noon to 3 today. Ron Diaz and I talking all Lightning. And then remember, you can watch the game tonight. I believe it's on the NBC Sports Network. And then also you can hear it, as always, on our sister station, News Radio 970 WFLA. All right, Burnsy, go do a rain dance before morning skate. Make sure it's lightning and thunder. And then we'll safe travels, brother, and hopefully we'll see you for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final instead of Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final. Deal?
Yeah, sounds good, man. And remember, if the Lightning do prevail and move on in the Stanley Cup Final, they have home ice. They finished with a higher record than Vegas, so they'll have first game of the Stanley Cup Final will be at Amalie Arena. So something to look forward to if that happens.
And then my favorite day, Media Day. I love Media Day. It's going to be fun. All right, safe travels, brother. Go Bolts.
All right, see you, man. Talk to you later.
All right, that's Bryan. I'm Jay. We'll see you guys next time on Bolts Breakdown.